فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So inshallah today we'll start with this first book in the Shafi'i Fiqh, or the first book for many. And this is Mutn Abi Shujaa, or it's also known as Ghayat al-Taqrib. And so Mutn al-Ghayat al-Taqrib, which is like the goal in bringing it close. And I also have like a translation that I'm working on. I'm almost halfway through, or a little halfway through. And in English, that is also available for you guys if you want to look at something to see just kind of a explanation of that in English, and it follows along pretty quickly. So since we're beginning in fiqh, just a couple beginner things, or like introductory notes when it comes to learning fiqh, of why we would learn fiqh and what is fiqh. And in general, fiqh is understanding the rulings that have the rulings that have to do with the actions that we do. And so understanding these rulings comes into different actions, and the different actions, there's some which have to do with the acts of worship. And then there's some that have to do with there's some that have to do with our interactions with other people, such as trading, buying, selling, giving out loans, and having debts or collateral to make sure that your loan gets paid. And also there's like mirath as well, which is like inheritance and these things. So there's that section, and there's also another section which has to do with family. So all the things about getting married, and also having when you get married, how do you get married, what are the conditions for it, what are the how would you get divorced if that ever had to happen, what is the right way to go about that, as well as the different types of like divorce, such as there's talaq, and there's also khula', which is like another type of it from the women's side, her asking for it. And so these will be encompassed in that side of like the usra, and also who gets custody of the child if something happens of that sort, and also who are you allowed to marry and who are you not allowed to marry. These would come in there. And then there's another section which has to do with the jinayat and qada. And this is kind of what it has to do with, like jinayat is like when somebody, whether they kill somebody or whether they cut off someone's arm or something, or if there's some type of ruling that has to be done by a judge, then this is what would fall into that category. And so these are the four categories, which is the first, which is ibadat, which is acts of worship. Then muamalat, which is the acts of like buy, selling, trade, all of these types of things. Then family, and fiqh of family, and then fiqh al-qada. These are the four categories that everything falls into. And the first one, which is the ibadat, this can be broken up according to like the four arkan of Islam, that other than the shahadatain. But then we have the first one, which is the salah. So then we'll look at the salah, and then we look at what does the salah have to do? What do we need to know in the salah? We look inside of this, and we break down what does the salah need. The first condition for it, tahara. So this is technically, it should be under kitab al-salah. But because there's so many issues that are in tahara, that it gets its own kitab, and like its own group, because there's so many. And also some of the issues of tahara, they go beyond salah as well, such as like menstruation. Like this, there's a lot of things that are connected with menstruation that there's a lot of rulings with that aren't necessarily for salah. They're also for other things such as siyam, also, and for other things such as in regards to talaq and what she can and can't do and stuff. So this is so we have salah, and then under that we have tahara. And then then inside of tahara we have different, we'll talk about the different things, whether it's tahara of like a state of being, such as like getting rid of the hadith, like that state of hadith, or getting rid of an actual thing that is najis on you. So this is two different types. So we'll talk about that inside of tahara. Then when we look at salah, we also have on the other spectrum of the types of fiqh, in the acts of worship, we also have so we have iqam as-salah wa ita az-zakah. So we have zakah as the next chapter, and then we also have on Hajj al-Bayt, and this will come after that. When Sawm Ramadan will come before that, because this is usually the tartib, or like the order that they will use. And so this is what we'll study in the first quarter of this book. And of course, this is some of the things that everyone needs to know, especially some of these aspects are things that everyone needs to know. And of the reasons why you would want to learn fiqh is to make sure that your actions that you do are accepted with Allah. You know, like we have to, it's one thing for us to do an act, and before we do this act, we have to know what are we doing. You know, someone, maybe they spend $7,000, maybe $15,000, and they get their plane ticket to go to Hajj, and they didn't study anything. They're just hoping that they figure it out on the way. You know, like it's important that if you're going to put down this much money, you actually know what you're doing before you go out there and do it. And this is maybe someone, they want to go make Umrah or whatnot. Then they need to learn whatever they need to learn to make sure that their Umrah is going to be right. Like learn what is ihram, okay, what are the things I can and can't do on it. And so, of course, there's certain things that when we learn fiqh, that this will help us a lot with making sure that we do our acts of worship in a way that's acceptable with Allah. And of course, anything that we are encompassed to, or like that we're told to do, we need to do everything on the road to do that thing as well. So if we're told to pray, then we need to learn everything about the prayer that makes sure that we actually come with prayer in a way that's acceptable. And that's encompassed within that command. And also the conditions for an action to be accepted is one, that you're following the way that the Prophet ﷺ, he showed us. And that's one, is like following the methodology or the way that he did, and also having the pure intention. So we can't have one without the other. We need to have both of these for our actions to be accepted with Allah. And of course, where does fiqh come from? It comes from, like, in general, the basis is the Quran and the Sunnah, and we also have qiyas and ijma'. These are the four places we take the rulings in general. And there's other things that we'll mention here and there, like istishab and some other like things that are like, what is, if a sahaba says something about something, like do we take this, or what do we use from that? This is things that we'll talk about, the details of how we use this in usul fiqh, but what we use, like where we get the rulings in fiqh, is Quran and Sunnah in general, and then qiyas and ijma', they actually stem from the Quran and the Sunnah as well. And then also, of course, we have the different madahibs of the Hanafi, the Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali. And there will be difference between these. And in this level, our goal is not to learn the differences, but rather to learn one madhab, so that we understand the issue in general, and we take it baby steps. So someone who wants to start off with Mutn al-Mughni, and they start off with Mughni ibn Qudamah. And so, rahimahullah. So if they start off with this book, it's like 30 volumes or 20 volumes, whatever. And they start off with this, they're going to spend their whole first 3 years of talib al-ilm in the very beginning of like tahara. And so if we take something that's a small thing, we can accomplish a lot in a small period of time. Understand, okay, tahara basically needs this, and salat basically needs this, and zakah needs this. And these are the basic issues. And then we kind of come back and we're reviewing what we originally learned, and we're adding to it. And reviewing what we originally learned, adding to it. And then we come back and we bring the differences of opinion after that. And that, when we bring the difference of opinion after that, we have a foundation where we can look at things. And there are some differences of opinion that there is no clear-cut text in this. And the difference of opinion where there's no clear-cut text, this is a place where we agree to disagree. Like, this is where they ask someone who knows, and they follow them in that if they don't know how to make ijtihad. And there's no, like, if you follow someone and someone else follows someone else, there's no fighting here. Like, and no one should ever be getting into fights about things where there's no clear-cut text in something, or the text could be understood multiple ways. Even if one way is the more correct way, we still don't, like, we accept the differences that come in these areas. And if there is a clear-cut text, then in this case we stand our ground in that clear-cut text. And a lot of times the issues in Aqidah, they're based on clear-cut texts that can't be reinterpreted. So the majority of Aqidah, there won't be any difference of opinion with Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And if there is a difference of opinion, it's usually because someone's going against the ijma', or they're going against some type of clear-cut text, and that would like make them, they would fall into a clear error. But not all of Aqidah is in this area. There's areas of ijtihad in Aqidah as well. But in general, it is in that most of Aqidah is clear-cut text, and a big majority of fiqh is also, it's going to be things that are not clear-cut. And if we look at the beginning of Warakat, he'll talk about what is fiqh. And when we looked at what are the issues of fiqh, these are the things that are disputed about. This is what we'll talk about. The fiqh itself are the issues of dispute. But we have things that are agreed upon in ijma' that are inside of fiqh because they give us a framework to work with. Of course, there's 5 salah, so we put that in there. But this is not an area of fiqh. This is something that there's ijma' on. But the issues of what the timing of the salah, when it comes in, and like when is the best time to pray the salah. Okay, this is fiqh because that's the difference. And the beauty also of like learning fiqh is that, and one of the big keys is that we bring together all of the texts in every area. If there's any area, we don't take some of the texts and ignore the other texts. We always have to have an answer for all of the texts. And this is a very key thing that Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is known for, is that any masala that there is, any issue or anything that there is, they bring together all of the texts that regard this issue, and then they look at it with the big picture. Look at it, how do we understand all of these texts? Are they all authentic? All right, they're all authentic, so how do we put these together? And when we do this, we'll see that there's, of course, like there will never be a contradiction between the texts. If they're all sahih, there won't be a contradiction except with what we misunderstand about it, or we don't understand how they work together. Maybe this one came before that one, and this one is the new ruling, and that one was the old ruling, or something of that sort. And we'll study this in usul fiqh when this happens, but we'll see the examples of this in fiqh here. And also some of the benefits of studying fiqh is the knowledge that we get from studying fiqh will give us peace in times of confusion. And I remember one time I was like a new Muslim, and I was leading some other people that they're on me, like they don't know anything about fiqh, and I was leading them in salah, and I stood up, and the guy was like, Subhanallah. I was like, I know this is like I know that this is, I'm supposed to be standing up right now, but he thought that I was in the wrong rak'ah. And so I was like, am I supposed to sit down and follow him, or am I supposed to just do what I'm doing? And we didn't know what to do. And he's like, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. I was like, do I sit up or I stand down? And I was very confused. And then, and just from like some of the situations where someone hasn't studied fiqh, they will find themselves in predicaments that they have no clue what to do. Maybe you forgot something in your salah, you don't know what to do, and you're in the salah. Do I like walk away from the salah? No. Like, what do I do? But if you study fiqh, it'll bring peace in that time of confusion. Okay, I stood up, and it was the second rak'ah. I was supposed to pray the tashahhud. I stood up though. Okay, I stood up. Okay, I'm going to make sujood sahwi at the end. Khalas. And I studied this in fiqh, and I know this is what I'm supposed to do in this issue. Or I forgot what rak'ah I am. Is this the third or fourth? It's the third. Forget it. Like it gives me peace when times of confusion can happen. And of course, this is of the benefits of studying fiqh as well as it's one of the best forms of worship. Like the studying itself is one of the best forms of worship, and so we should try to make sure that we are, when we're studying, that we're intending for this to be an act of worship. And this is important, like us just getting together and studying the Quran and Sunnah, this is on the application of the Quran and Sunnah that we're studying. This is an act of worship in and of itself, and it's of the ways that Allah can show His favor for us when He gives us understanding in the Deen. And this is a sign that Allah wants good for us. And when مَنْ يُرِيدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرٌ يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ, like the person that Allah wants good for, He gives them fiqh or understanding in the Deen. And also it protects one from displeasing Allah without knowing. And this is also of the benefits of understanding fiqh. And sometimes there'll be things, if we didn't learn it before, we'll find ourselves in something that is, like say we find ourselves in a type of riba. We didn't know we're in riba here, but we fell into it, and we're just doing a transaction with our buddies, like trading money in something. But we did it in a way that there's riba, and this is something that's haram. And someone's going to get oppressed in this situation if there's riba running around. So when we study these things, it'll keep us away from falling into something that's displeasing to Allah. Of course, the person who does something unaware, they are not like punished for what they weren't given the message for. But at the same time, anything that we do wrong is always going to have a consequence, regardless of whether or not we're going to be held accountable for that punishment, or like for what we did without knowing. There will be a consequence because we're falling away from the guidance, and so there will be a consequence in that. And just because we're given excuse for not knowing, that doesn't mean that we're given excuse for not learning. Like that's a different thing. So there'll be a difference between like udhr bil jahl, for the person not knowing the ruling of something, and the udhr bil adam ta'allum. Like this person is he excused for not learning in just the general manner. And so this is something that, yes, there's an excuse for someone for they didn't know, but at the same time, for them not learning, they're subject to punishment for not learning what is called for them to know. And so, of course, there's many other benefits of learning fiqh, but these are of some of the greatest. And this may Allah give us fiqh in the deen and make this book easy for us and give us understanding in this. So we're going to start up with what the author here he has to say, and the author Abu Shujaa. He is a qadi, and he lived for a very long time. And when he was asked about why he lived so long, he said that he kept his limbs from doing wrong in his young age, so Allah protected his limbs in his old age. And some say that he lived over like 130 years, and Allah knows best how long he lived. But some of them don't say he lived a very, very long time, which is like over 130 years or so. And so, rahimahullah. In this book that he wrote, Mutn Abi Shujaa, he wrote it in a way that found great acceptance, which is of the signs that Allah accepted this work from him. Like when we see that something is accepted, such as a book that everyone starts off with and they get a lot of attention, we can see that there was probably ikhlas in his work for this, and he did this for the sake of Allah. And also books such as like Riyadh al-Salihin gained acceptance just across the world. We can see that Allah accepted this work from Imam Nawawi, and that there was probably a ton of ikhlas that went into the work, and that Allah blessed it and made him a means of spreading a lot of the sunnah in that way. And this is a work that is relatively easy to understand in Arabic, and a lot of people from other madhabs, they will wish that they had something like this method, like this mutn to go off of and to start with, because it's so easy to digest, and the way that he broke it apart is very easy, and inshallah we'll see that here. So starting off with what he says, he says here, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and this is of course starting off with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, when the Prophet ﷺ would start off and write notes and write letters to different officials, and write any letter, he would start off with the basmalah. And also this is the sunnah in the Quran, of course, that Allah starts off with the basmalah at the beginning of every surah, and of course with the beginning of the Fatiha. And then he says here, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin an-Nabiyyi wa alihi at-Tahirin wa sahabatihi ajma'in. And so, of course, he starts off with the hamdalah, and so this is also a part of the thing that it's like the sunnah of people who write is that they normally will start off with the hamdalah as well, saying Alhamdulillah. This is also of the things that we should try to always make sure that we start off with this, and also with the salah on the Prophet ﷺ, which is sanat, which is asking Allah to raise the mention of the Prophet ﷺ in the highest ranks. And whenever somebody gives salah on the Prophet ﷺ, Allah will give that same salah on that person who did it, and 10 times over. So of course this is of the greatest ways to gain the favor of Allah and gain the closeness to the Prophet ﷺ is to increase in salah upon the Prophet ﷺ. And of the ways of doing this is by reading the sunnah. Because if you ever read like a book of hadith, you're constantly going to be reading out of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You'll find this all over the time, and this is one of the ways that you can increase the dhikr while you're doing something productive, like some people, maybe they sit there with beats and they just they say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, and they just repeat this over and over again. But if you were sitting there with say like with a sunnah, or with like Riyadh al-Salihin or Bukhari or Sunan al-Tirmidhi or Jami' al-Tirmidhi, then you would be saying sallallahu alaihi wasallam all the time. And every time the person that increases this, they will be the closest to the Prophet in sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the afterlife. And this is something that Imam Suyuti, he mentions in his book that's Sharh of the which is Tadrib al-Rawi. He mentions in there that the benefits of the muhaddithin is that they're constantly sending salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they will be the closest ones to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Jannah because of the amount of time that they are saying salatu wassalam alayhi. And so this is of the benefits of that. And also he says here wa alihi, and ali is interpreted in two ways. Some people will say that aluhu is the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like Banu Hashim, and some of them will also say it's his followers. And so in both of these views, they have a lot of weight, but like the more encompassing view is that aluhu is the followers of him. And of course, the ones of his family also encompass that as well. He says at-tahirin, which is like of the pure of his pure followers, and with sahabatihi, and of course the sahaba ajma'in. So he sends also the salah on them as well. And of course, to single out them with salah without the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then this is not sunnah. But if to bring someone on with like atf, like to add them at the end of it, this is great. There's no problem with that. And so here the writer, he says, قال القاضي أبو شجاع أحمد بن الحسين بن أحمد الأصفهاني رحمه الله تعالى. So he says here, of course, the person who says قال القاضي, this is the person writing, not Abu Shujaa himself saying that. And then he says, سألني بعض الأصدقاء حفظهم الله. So he says that some of my friends, or some of the friends, may Allah protect them. They asked him, so may Allah حفظهم الله تعالى أن أعمل مختصرا في الفقه على مذهب الإمام الشافعي. So he says they asked me to make an a'mala is like to make mukhtasara. And a mukhtasara is something that has a lot of meaning in a short amount of words. So it encompasses a lot of meaning, and he brings it in, a lot of meanings into a short few words. And sometimes it can be harder to understand just by a single read. So a mukhtasara, a lot of times it takes an explanation itself, but once the explanation is understood, then the mukhtasar can bring up that whole explanation in a small period of time, which is the benefit of that. في الفقه على مذهب الإمام الشافعي. So of course this is in fiqh Shafi'i. And so rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi wa ridwanuhu. And so then he asks for Allah to have mercy on him and be pleased with him. في غاية الاختصار ونهاية الإيجاز. And so in with the goal, or like coming up to like the ghayat of شيء ترتب الأثر عليه. So like the ghaya of the salah is for it to be accepted. Like this is the ghaya, is like the goal of something. What is the end goal of this? And so his goal of this is ikhtisar, which is like bringing things into a small package, a lot of things into a small package. When nihayat al-ijaz is to have all of these things brought together, like to have like the most that he can of ijaz. Ijaz is like ikhtisar. It's having a lot of meaning in a small amount of words, where the words themselves are smaller than the meaning of it. And he says the reason of this, ليقرب على المتعلم درسه. And so that the person who's learning, al-muta'allim, which is the person who is learning, his dars is brought closer to him. So like what he's learning is brought closer to him. وَيَسْهُلُ عَلَى الْمُبْتَدِي حِفْظُهُ. And so like for the person who is starting off, that he can understand it, that he can memorize it easily. وَأَنْ أُكْثِرَ فِيهِ مِنَ التَّقْسِيمَاتِ وَحَصْرِ الْخِصَالِ. And so he says, in that I would, this is of what he was asked to do, and is to have a lot of, to make a lot of taqsimat, which is like break up things into their parts and in their different categories, a lot of categorization, and like bringing together all the different pieces of things that are on the side of things. And so he says, فَأَجَبْتُهُ إِلَى ذَلِكَ طَالِبًا لِلثَّوَابِ. So he says, I answered him, and the people, or like he answered this request, looking for طالبًا, this is hal, he's looking for a thawab from Allah. راغبا إلى الله تعالى في التوفيق للصواب. And so that he's also in a state of looking for Allah to give him that tawfiq, which is the success to what is correct, للصواب, which is what is correct. إنه على ما يشاء قدير. And of course Allah is over, he can do whatever he wishes to do, and he is capable of that. وَبِعِبَادِهِ لَطِيفٌ خَبِيرٌ. And that with his servants, that he is latif. And latif is of the like the subtle ways that Allah gives us benefit and gives us rahmah, and that Allah will give us things that we don't even know about, in ways that we don't even expect. And this is some of the ways that Allah shows his lutf for us, and this is of the great benefits and the blessings that Allah gives us, and we don't comprehend it except just a tiny bit of that. And also Khabir is of the other names of Allah, like Latif, and Khabir means to be knowledgeable about like the subtle different things. Like Alim is like all knowledgeable, and Khabir is like with the subtle details of things. Wallahu ta'ala alam. So he starts off with this, and as I mentioned, like for someone who's studying, this would be the place that they should start. Of course, in studying the Shafi'i madhab, they would start off with Mutn Abi Shujaa, and then they would do Iqna after that, if they want like this quickest road to understanding it. They would study Iqna. Of course, this has to be done with a sheikh, because there's lots of stuff in Iqna that won't be understood without a sheikh. And also then after that, you would go to Minhaj al-Talibin, Imam al-Nawawi. And then after studying this with the sheikh, and then also Mughni al-Muhtaj, he can study with this. If he studies this with the sheikh, it's great, and this is the end with the sheikh. And then after that, he can go and read all the books by himself. He should be able to understand everything and be set. But this is the method that my sheikh Ahmed Rushdi, that Hafidhullah, that he basically prescribes for people. And I know in the Somali community they won't necessarily study Iqna, but rather they'll study Umdat Salik. As that second level after, or that level right before Minhaj. And while there's benefits to Umdat Salik, without a doubt, it's a very good book. There are things that are missing from it, as like it's a matan, it's not necessarily a book that gives you sharh. So studying a sharh that is very like condensed is it gives you the dalil alongside of everything that you're going to be studying as well, and you'll find a lot of the things in there as well. So starting off with, as we mentioned here, the first one we're going to start off with is the ibadat. And inside of the ibadats, the first thing we're going to start off with is salah. And inside of salah, the first thing we're going to start off with is the first shart for salah, which is tahara. So we'll take this, and this is its own book because of the amount of things that are inside of it. So the author here, he says, Kitab al-Tahara. And tahara is purity, and like we would say, it's purity, and it's of two types. So there's the tahara, which is something that's ma'nawi, or it's like a meaning, and then there's a tahara, which is of something that is like actual, like it's a maddiya, like it's something that's a material thing. So the tahara ma'nawi would be like I made wudu, or I was previously junub, and then I made ghusl, or then I made wudu. This is of a ma'na, because we don't necessarily see anything, but it's a state of being. And then of the real thing is like if there was something, if there's some type of najis got in someone's clothes, then how do they clean this, and of the different things of that sort. This is the other type of tahara, which is of something that we would see, which is being free from the najis and whatnot. So of course the way that we would look at tahara is there's a main method of coming into of tahara, of getting it, and the main method is water. And then there's a secondary method, which is turab. or like dirt. And this is in tayammum. This, if we don't have water, then we look to the second method of purification, which is dirt. So the first one he goes into here is he goes into miyah. And so he talks about the different categories of miyah. And the first thing he talks about the categories is in regards to where does miyah come from? Like this water, where does it come from? So he says, al-miyahu allati yajuzu biha tathiru sab'u miyah. And so he says that there's 7 types of miyah that it's permissible to tathir, which is making something tahir. So tathir is like tahara yutahiru and tathira. And so like this is to make something pure. And so he says there's seven types of this, or he says there's 7 types of water and whatnot. So the first he brings out is he says ma'u samat, which is water that comes down from the sky. And so like this is like we'd say rainwater. Wa ma'ul bahr, and this is ma that comes from the sea. And this is something that's permissible for us to make tahara with. And this also comes from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ was asked about people that are sailors, and they are on the sea constantly, and he asks, and they want to know if they can make like if they use the water that they bring to drink, it's going to be hard for them to make wudu all the time. So they want to know if they can use the water of the sea, and he says that the water is pure. Or it's purifying. Its water is purifying, and also it's the meta, or like the things that die inside of it, like the fish of it and whatnot, because of course they're not slaughtered. They're halal to eat. And so this is of the things that is easy for us. We don't need to make sure that the water is pure H2O, but rather, if it's water and it has the word water that falls onto it, then this is something we can use. So he says here the second one, which was ma'ul bahari, which is water of the sea, or seawater. And then he says ma'ul nahr is like river water, ma'ul bi'r, which is well water, and ma'ul ayn, which is water that comes up from a spring. And of course ayn has many different meanings in Arabic language, and of them is spring. So you have like a spring, and this is what we'd say ayn. Ayn can also mean like the eye that we look through. Of course, it can also mean like someone who's a spy. And it can also mean gold. And of these meanings here, it means, of course, it's clear that it means spring here. And then he also says وَمَاءُ الثَّلْجِ وَمَاءُ الْبَرَدِ. And so ma'u thalj is like if we have water that comes from if we have like water that comes from snow, and we also have waters that come from like glacier. Both of these things are permissible to use because they come from there's still water. And he gives these basic terminologies. And if we were to say in like a quick form, we'd say water either comes from the sky or it comes from the ground. And this is usually the 2 sources of where water comes from, whether it's from like the rainwater, or if it comes from like the ground, from under the ground. So he gives this example here, and there's not a lot for us to use from this other than we know that these things are permissible, and keeping in mind that salt water is permissible to use to clean and to purify, as maybe someone doesn't think that. And so the next thing he says here, he breaks it into categories of how we use it. Then he says ثم المياه على 4 أقسام طاهر مطهر غير مكروه. And so this is the first. He says that miyah is 4 types, or he says categories. And the first one he gives here is tahir, mutahhirun, ghayru makruh. And so this is something that is tahir, which means it's not najis. In and of itself, it's tahir, mutahhir. It can make something else tahir. So it can purify. If there's something najis on something, it can purify it. And then he says ghayru makruh, and this is something that it's not disliked for this. And so this is the best category here. And he says وَهُوَ الْمَاءُ الْمُطْلَقِ. And so he says, and this is ma' al-mutlaq. And so what he means by this is that if you say the word ma', then you would automatically, like if you were to say ma' without any other descriptors on it, you would say that it fits this category, because it didn't change you don't need anything else. If you say I want water, and someone brings you tea, yes, it was water, but I didn't mean that. When I said water, this is not what I meant. Or if you said water and someone brought you soapy water, you didn't mean that. Like, this is soapy water, like, or if they said water, you brought you salt water, this is water, but, it still can be called water, in this sense. And so this is something that's tahir, mutahhir, ghayr makruh. And he says it's a ma'ul mutlaq, which means mutlaq here is that it's when you say ma' just by itself, this is what comes to mind. And what would fit for this one word when you say ma', water, like this water by itself, you don't need any other descriptions for it, but it is water. Or if you said coconut water, no, this isn't water by itself. You need coconut water to say what it really is. And then he gives the next category here. He says tahir, mutahhirun, makruh. And so he says that this is something that is tahir. Yes, it's not dirt, it's not najis, and it's also mutahhir. And so it also will clean, but it's makruh to use. And so he says, وَهُوَ الْمَاءُ الْمُشَمَّسُ. And so he says this is a type of water that mushammas here. It comes from like the word shammasa yushammisu tashmisha, which is like to make it's water that has been out in the sun for a long period of time, like in a hot land. If water got held out in the sun in like a copper basin, this water will turn. It'll get very hot in the basin, like a copper basin. And there's like for water to be hot in a copper basin, there's properties in copper itself that is bad. Like for it to be on the skin, and there would be it could possibly cause harm to the skin for that. And there will also be like a smell to it. And so this water, yes, it would. Yes, it's tahir, like it's not najis. And it also would, like if you were to make wudu with it, here we understand that it would be something that it would give you purity, like it would give you tahara, but it's makruh because it possibly could harm you. And so if something could possibly harm you, then it's makruh to use it. And if it was absolutely sure that it would harm you, in this case it would be haram, like if it's going to harm you, because the Prophet ﷺ said la darar wa la dirar, which is like that we shouldn't have any harm or reciprocation of that. So if we knew that it was going to harm us, then it would be haram in this case, unless there's nothing else to use and whatnot. But even then we would go to tayammum if there was something that was actually going to harm us. This water was going to harm us by using it. But if we think that it could harm us, this is the case, then it would be makruh. Because we think maybe it could harm us, maybe not, maybe we'll get away with it. But in the Shafi'i madhab, they talk about certain things for something to be ma mushammas, for it to be in this category. One, it needs to be in a hot land. It needs to be a land that is very hot, like Saudi Arabia, or something that actually has like that high temperature, and it needs to be in the time of heat. And it also needs to be in a basin that is metal. Like that is a brazen basin, that it's heated in a brazen basin, metal basin. It doesn't necessarily have to be copper, but of course copper, we know that it has negative properties in that. And then it would also need to be, even if it was cooled down after that, like this is like if it still has that properties, that would I believe that would still be ma mushammas. But it needs to be hot water that's heated up in a hot land that's in a metal basin, or like something that's a metal basin that's heated up in that. And so that's where he says here it's makruh. And basically the reason it's makruh is because it possibly there's the understanding that maybe it could harm you. And so this is the reason it's makruh. And so he says وَهُوَ مَا مُشَمَّسْ. And then he also gives another category here. Going into the third category, he says وَطَاهِرٌ غَيْرُ مُطَهِّرٍ وَهُوَ الْمَاءُ الْمُسْتَعْمَلُ وَالْمُتَغَيِّرُ بِمَا خَالَطَهُ مِنَ الطَّاهِرَاتِ. And so here's the next category which he gives. And he says that that this next category is something that is tahir. Of course it's not najis. غَيْرُ مُطَهِّرٍ. It doesn't purify. So this water doesn't purify. It's different than the other one. And he says it's ma'ul musta'mal. Al-ma'ul musta'mal means water that's already been used. And water that's already been used in the wajib part of salah. So the wajib part of tahara. So if I were to make wudu, that water that comes off of my face the first time, if I were to gather this water that comes off of my face the first time I wash my face, and the water that comes off my arms the first time I wash my arms, and the first time that I like whatever that first drop is of my head and whatnot, or like the water that comes off of my feet that is obligatory for me to use. This water, if I gathered it up and I wanted to make wudu again with it, the madhab of Shafi'i is that it would not give me wudu again one more time. It would only give me that wudu the first time. And that's for the water that is used in the wajib part of wudu. And the things that are extra, this is fine. Like this doesn't fall into this category of ma musta'mal. Yeah.
Okay, so you said it's the water that came the first time.
The first.
It's like the second time.
No, there's no problem because that's sunnah. It's the ma that is used on the first time is the part that's obligatory. The first time we wash our face, the first wash is obligatory. So the water that comes from this would be musta'mal. The second time, it's not doing something obligatory. So it wouldn't have that same category applied to it. But if someone was to say someone wanted to take a bath, so they wanted to take a bath from janaba, so they filled up a bathtub, they sat under it, and then thumma nawa. Then he had his intention to get rid of janaba. So he sits in the bath and he goes, he has the niyyah, then all of this bath water now is musta'mal. Because it's all connected. And all of it was doing that. And at one time, boom, all of it is musta'mal. You can't use it for anything else now. And of course there's other scenarios that they'll bring up later. But this is of the simple scenarios here. So this is another, like the water that would be used for raising janaba. This is the same thing. And while it's connected to the body, and once it disconnects, while it's connected, it's not musta'mal until it disconnects from the body. Once it disconnects, then it's musta'mal. So once it falls down, then it's used. And you don't use it again. This is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, and they are alone in this view. And under the Qadim, the madhab al-Qadim, which is the madhab that Imam Shafi'i had before coming to Egypt and Baghdad, this was something that was not a thing at that point in time. And most people don't, like this, in reality, we don't actually use this masala very much. But it is something that is it's a Shafi'i masala. And so this is ma musta'mal. And the second one that he gave of this category that also doesn't raise tahara, or like it doesn't give someone the tahara, is al-mutaghayyiru bima khalatahu min at-tahirat. So if I have, say I have a bucket of water. This bucket of water is just regular water, okay, this can do it. But if I add something in here, so say I add something such as like laundry detergent. Laundry detergent is tahir. But since I mix this in here, I can't separate this from the water anymore. This water has changed. Mutaghayyir means it's changed. And if something that is tahir, yes, this is tahir, but this now is not something that purifies. So yes, of course it'll get rid of stains in your clothes and whatnot. But as far as when it comes to the ruling of something that is najis, getting the ruling of najis, leaving it wouldn't, according to the madhab Shafi, if I only use this to wash my clothes, then in this case it wouldn't change anything. Like my clothes would still be najis. I would need to have water that's water to wash if there was like najis in the clothes. For it to be actually done that way, because this has something that has been mixed into it of something that is also tahir. And while it's not najis, it doesn't make anything najis with this. At the same time, it also doesn't raise that. And so if I were to make wudu with this, it doesn't do anything for me. And so this is a type of that. And there's many scenarios. If I were to take a tea bag or Kool-Aid and I were to put that in water, it's no longer water. Like we said, water mutlaq is the water that you would say water. When you say water, it's water. But you don't need to put anything water with Kool-Aid in it or something like that. It doesn't need any other things. But if I change the name of it, then it's no longer water and I can't use it. Even though I can't use it to raise like the state of impurity. And so these are the first three categories that he gives. Yeah?
Is this something that dissolves inside the water?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I had leaves that fell in the water from outside, then this, like the leaves they fell into the water and whatnot, but they didn't necessarily change the composition of the water, except maybe something very minor. So I could still make wudu with that. Or if I have, say I had like dirt that fell in the water, boom, I have a whole dirt water. If I left it for like 20 minutes or an hour, the dirt would settle. I can still make wudu with this. Yeah. So it's something that actually changes the composition of the water. and it actually becomes like I mentioned, there was like the soap detergent, because it changes the composition. If you left it for like a day or two, it's not going to settle to the bottom, and now you have water. And like if you had oil or something of that sort, the oil will float, and that's separate from it, so you can still use it. And so that is something that would change it from something that's pure that falls into it, that changes it. And then he says, وَمَاءٌ نَجِسٌ. This is the last category, which is something that is najis. And he says here, وَهُوَ الَّذِي حَلَّتْ فِيهِ نَجَاسَةٌ وَهُوَ دُونَ الْقُلَّتَيْنِ. So, and this is something, this water here is the water that is najis, and it's the one that something najis has fallen into it. And it is less than qullatayn. And so this is, qullatayn is about 200 liters. 200 liters, which is about a 50-gallon barrel for you Americans. So if you have a 50-gallon barrel, anything that's like less than that would be less than qullatayn. If any drop of, like if I saw just even a drop of like saliva from a dog fall into this is najis with us. So this drop in there, even if it doesn't change any of the composition of it, I don't see any change, I don't taste any change, and there's no, but I saw the drop fall in there. All of it is najis. This is the view of Imam. This is the view of the Shafi'i madhab and the Imam Shafi'i. That this is any bit of najasa that falls into water that is less than qullatayn, which is around 100. Some say it's 195 liters. Some of them say it's like 205 liters. There's a little difference in that, but it's right around this mark. And so if najis falls into that, or say I have something that's the mutanajis, I have something, say I have like something from like maybe like a pig or something, like a piece of a pork skin or something, and it falls in there, boom, like all of it's najis. So this is something that any najis that falls into this, it would become najis. And this is the madhab of Imam Shafi'i. And or he says here, he says, أو كان قلتين فتغيرا. So if it's something that is more than this, say it's more. Say we have a pond, and we have this pond that's a small pond, but it's bigger than qullatayn. And we got a raccoon that died and fell into it, and it's now rotting inside of it. And the water, if I smelled it, there's a rank to it because of that raccoon. This water, even though it's more than qullatayn, it's najis, and I can't use this. And if it was, say it was, I see the dead raccoon in the water or whatever, and so I see the dead raccoon in the water, but the water is still good and it's bigger than qullatayn. Nothing has changed from it. No colors. No colors are changed. There's no. I don't smell anything. I don't see like little floaties of it in there. Okay, then this is fine to use. You know. As long as none of the actual taste or sight or like the color or the smell has changed, then then it's still tahir. So this is the basic of this, and of course the why qullatayn, and this is because the Prophet ﷺ, he says he was asked about water. He was asked about like water that was out in the wilderness and whatnot, and sometimes like dead animal parts fall into it, and other nasty things from animals fall into it. And so he said, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إذا كان الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث. And so he says that if the water was qullatayn, then it's not going to carry any of the khabith, which is like any of the najas or like the dirtiness and whatnot. And so we give this understanding that qullatayn, what we understand from this is if it's qullatayn, then if something najis falls into it, it doesn't make it najis. And of course, the other side, unless it changes the smell, this comes from ijma'. There's ijma' on the fact that if the water, even if it's more, if it changes with one of the sight, smell, like it changes color, it changes smell, or it changes the taste with something najis, there's ijma' that this is something that is not permissible to use for tahara. And these are the basic categories. And here he also gives at the end of this, he says, وَكُلَّتَانِ 500 رِطْلٍ بَغْدَادِيًا and تقريبا في الأصح. And so here he gives his measurement. And this time this was understood, like ritl and whatnot was something that was used in their time. And as I mentioned here, you can write down 200 liters or 195 or 205, like give or take some. And he says taqriban, and the reason he says taqriban is because this is not an exact measurement. This measurement could be a little over and could be a little less, and so we don't say exactly at 100 or we don't say at 196 liters. As soon as it passes the 95 to the 6, then all of a sudden no, this is kullatain or over kullatain. So it's kind of taqriban means it's close, roundabout. So we don't give it an actual tahdidan is the opposite of that, which means exact, like an exact measurement. And this is used in other places, such as like when we can shorten the salah is actually on like a certain we have our certain amount of time, a distance that is exact. Like 1 foot over that distance, you can shorten your salah. 1 foot under, or if you didn't quite make it by a couple centimeters, then you can't shorten the salah. So this is like tahdidan, which is like 53 miles taqriban for that. But that is exact. Like this is an exact measurement for that. But here it's something that's roundabouts. And it comes because the Imam Shafi'i, when he asked someone what was the kullatain, the person, he gave a certain number and then he said washay. And so he gave washay, and so like it's something that he didn't quite mean a half of the next number, but when he said washay, he means that it didn't quite make half of the next one, but he says it's half just to be safe. Because he wouldn't say washay after saying a number, except that it didn't reach the next number, and if it would have reached the next number or half of it, he would have said something other than washay. This is like the art of, and the way that Arabs use the terminologies in that. So I'm going to use the board here, and I'm going to point to. Let me see. Do you have a? Let's see if we have this. I'm gonna make the different categories here, so inshallah we can see them. So we have water, or mat. It's a mat. And the first category is of like where they come from. It's either from the sky or it's from down below. But from what we use, it's either you can either use it to, it's either tahir or it's not tahir. So I'll say that, all right? Tahir, which is pure. Yeah, let's put that over there. Pure. Or I'd say najis, all right? And najis. And it's the opposite, yeah. And so we have either tahir or najis. And then under these two categories, of course, we can't use this. This is no good to use. We can't use this category. And then the next one, under tahir, we have mutahhir. And so let's say mutahhir. Mutahhir. And mutahhir, of course, it purifies. So we have purifying. And this purifies. And this is of two types. So we have one that is pure, it's pure water without any other names on it. And let me move this in, just in case that becomes an issue. So we have which is the ma'ul mutlaq. You say al-mutlaq. So we have ma'ul mutlaq, and this is just plain water. We say plain water. Plain water. H2O. And then we also have the other one, which is makruh. It's makruh to use, but it still purifies. And of this one, this is al-mushammas. And this is amam mushammas with the conditions that we said, that it needs to be in a hot land, needs to be in a brazen basin or a container. Yeah.
Yeah. Is this mentioned? Is there like evidence for this?
For this one in particular, the evidence that's used is that Omar radiallahu anhu, he says it creates baras, which is like a skin disease. And so since he said it creates a skin disease, even if we say that the riwayah has, some people say that this is not sahih on him, like this riwayah is not good on him, we could still say if we think that it's going to cause a problem, then it would be makruh. There's people that say no, it's makruh, and they just leave it. They say it's not makruh, use whatever you want. And this is like, there's definitely that's definitely a view that's that's held up by evidences. But from a general position is if the doctors, they say this water that you're going to use, even if it's not mushammas, it's something else. But this water that you're going to use is going to possibly create a skin disease for you, or it's going to hurt you, or it's going to cause some type of disorder with you. If you think that it's possible that this is going to happen, then it's makruh for you to use it. And this is because that we need to leave anything that's harmful. That's the reason for it. Just like it's makruh for you to eat something that you know could possibly cause you harm. So that's makruh for you. And if you know it's going to cause you harm, then it's haram. And so it's the same way of using something that possibly could cause harm. So that's the mushammas. And this is makruh. And I'm also going to write it here. And the ruling for this is makruh. And of course, we talked about makruh in our last class, which is something that we're rewarded for leaving it, but we're not punished for doing it. So there's no punishment with doing it, but we're rewarded for leaving this, as long as we leave it for Allah's sake and whatnot. So then we have this water that purifies, that is tahir, and we also have one that doesn't purify. And this is of two types. So the first one that we mentioned here is al-musta'mal. And this is used water. And so this is that used water that was used, or is say used here, I'm going to put that. Used in tahara. And tahara, yeah, in purifying. Purifying. Yeah, that was purifying. Yeah, so it's used in purifying. This is the mal musta'mal, and it is tahir, but it does not purify. So I would say it doesn't غير مطهر. That's it. غير مطهر. غير مطهر. And so this is doesn't purify. Not purify. So I'm going to put an X on it. And this is the musta'mal doesn't purify. According to we're going off of that, inshallah. I don't want to go too far into all of the evidences because that takes a lot of time. But in general, we get the understanding where we're coming from in that. So we have water musta'mal, and then we also have al-mutaghayyir, with something mutaghayyir. And this is the mutaghayyir is something that is changed with something pure. So, and this is the changed water with something that is pure. So I'm going to say changed. So yeah. Changed with something pure. Something pure. Something pure. Pure. So change with something pure, and this also can't be used. And we also have the other one, which is najis, which is something same thing as this, mutaghayyir, except it's mutaghayyir with something najis, or it's not mutaghayyir, but it's less than kullatayn. So like this, there's it's of two types. There's kullatayn, or it's less than kullatayn. We'll say it's less than kullatayn or more than kullatayn. So I'm going to make just another category over here. And so it's either over, say 200 liters. I'm just to round it up. 200 liters, or it's less. Or it's less. Less than 200. And 200 liters. LT. All right. And so if it's less than 200 liters, then even if it doesn't change, then it is going to be najis. If it's over than 2 liters, then it needs to be mutaghayyir. It needs to be mutaghayyir with it. All right. And so this needs to be changed with it. It needs to change something from it. So we have these basic categories, of course. Met, it's either tahir or najis, all right? And then either it purifies or it doesn't purify. Of the types that purifies, there's two. There's either plain water or something that is mushammas, which is makruh to use. Or it's not purifying, and that's either because it's used or it's changed. And then of course najis, it's either less than 200 liters and something najis fell into it, or it's over 200 liters and it changed from something najis. And if it's over 200 liters and najis falls into it, does it necessarily become najis? Is it automatically najis just because it's over 200 liters? It's over kullatain. No, it needs to have changed. It needs to have changed its composition. All right. So this is the water in general, and this is. I hope it's clear for y'all. And if you have questions, let me know at this time, inshallah, before we move forward.
You said
Barad. Yeah, this is. I believe it's glacier. Yeah. Or it's from it's like from ice. Or maybe it's hail.
So thalj is more like snow.
It's snow, yeah. All right, inshallah, we'll try to, each lesson we'll try to make it 1 hour and 30 minutes so we can cover a lot more material. Of course, the extra 30 minutes is easier than having a whole another lesson every 2 lessons to catch up with it. So the next thing we'll start off with is this next chapter is in regards to tanning. So one, we need to know how do we make tahara? We're going to make it with water. All right, and there's also another way of making something pure other than just water. And this is if you have something that is so if you have like a dead animal, this dead animal that died without slaughter, this is something that's najis. It's called meita. So meita is anything that was any animal that died in an Islamic way, like without Islamic slaughtering, or like from someone who's from the Ahl al-Kitab, if they slaughtered it in the way that is prescribed with them, such as like kosher, okay, this is not meita. Or if there was someone who was Masihi or like Nasrani that slaughtered in a way, of course, as long as he doesn't say in Jesus' name or something of that sort. But if you were to slaughter in an actual slaughtered way, then in this case it would be something that is not meita. But any other dead animal, if it's not slaughtered in an Islamic way, then it's considered meita. And this is something, it is impermissible for us to eat it, and it's also najis. And so because it's najis, if we want to benefit from that thing, we can't benefit from eating it, but we could possibly benefit from its skin. And the Prophet ﷺ, he found someone that in a hadith here you see at the end that it's narrated from Ali ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, and that he said, وجد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم شاة ميتة أعطيتها مولى لميمونة من الصدقة. So there was a shat, or like there's a shat, which is like a lamb or a sheep that was meita, that was given to a person, a mawla, which is someone who has been freed, like a freed slave, to Maymuna radiallahu anha, and from the sadaqah. So she was given this, and since it's meita, she doesn't know like what she's supposed to do with this. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Hallan tafa'tum bi jildiha." And like, so halla is a type of like saying, why don't you benefit in tafa'tum? Like, why didn't you benefit from its jild, which is the skin from it? And then she says, this is meita. And so she understands from this that she can't use it because it's meita. And then the Prophet ﷺ replied and said, "Innama haruma akluha." And so he says that the Prophet ﷺ, he says here that the only thing that has been made haram or haruma is eating it. So we understand from this that it's not what she thought. She thought that she can't use it because it's meita and it's najis, but rather it's the akl, that like eating it, that's what's haram. But the rest of it, if you want to benefit from it, then you can do it with the condition in that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا دُبِغَ الْإِهَابُ فَقَدْ طَهَرَ. And so the Prophet ﷺ says, if there's if like the dead skin has been tanned, then it's become pure. And so this is the basis of this chapter here that we'll talk about, is that there's another type of purity that happens with the tanning process. And the tanning process is basically getting rid of all of the things that are going to, of course there's different ways that they get rid of like the guts and whatnot from the skin, but at the end result is that this skin doesn't change if it's left. Like if there's a little bit of water that's left on it or it's left out, it's not going to mold and rot away. That it's been put through that tanning process, And so now, once it's gone through that tanning process, it now can be washed. It was washed once with water, and then it becomes pure. And that's the dibagh, which is the tanning process. And so Abu Shujaa, rahimahullah, he says here fasl, which of course the fasl is like a separate chapter, like we'd say maybe chapter inside of that. But he starts off with kitab, then he has fasl, which is like sections inside of that kitab, and then inside of the book that we have here, Mutn Abi Shujaa, there's a bunch of kutub, like which is kitab, which is bringing together a bunch of things, and fasl is separating. So he says, وَجُلُودُ الْمَيْتَةِ تَطْهُرُ بِالْدِبَاغِ. And so he says that the skins of mayta تَطْهُرُ بِالدِبَاغ, which is that they become pure with the tanning process. The evidence of the hadith that I just mentioned. إِلَّا, then he gives an exception here. He says, إِلَّا جِلْدَ الْكَلْبِ وَالْخِنْزِيرِ. And so he says here, except for the skins of a dog, which is kalb, which is dog, or khinzir, which is a pig. These two, they don't change their state of being from this to pure afterwards. They're already najis while they're alive, so they're not going to change back to being pure after they, in essence, have been najis their whole life. As opposed to every single animal in general. Well, he'll talk about it later, but all animals are pure. Like animals are pure in general. If they're alive, everything's pure about it. And so this is the animal that's alive, it's pure, except for what has been narrated, which is the kalb. Like if a kalb licks a dish, then this dish needs to be washed so many times, and this is the tahara for that dish. So we understand that the kalb is not pure when he did this. And the khinzir, he also is in a worse state. He's in a worse state than the dog, in that we can't even benefit from him. But a dog, we can have him as a guard dog, as long as he's outside the house and whatnot, or we can have him as like a shepherding dog, or for birding and whatnot, like going out and hunting and fetching things. So like fetching the game. So there's actual use for dogs, but the khinzir, there's no use for him. He's useless, and it's not even permissible for us to have him. And so we would see that this is the reason, or like some of the things we would see if he has been made haram, we would see that it's probably because of his najasa, that this is in a state of najasa. And so he says these two things, if in their lifetime they weren't najis in their lifetime, then after they die, then we can't change that state ever. They're najis, all the way down. And also he gives another example here. He says, وَمَا تَوَلَّدَ مِنْهُمَا أَوْ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا. So he says, and whatever is born, tawallada means like whatever is born or bred for them, from them. It's like, say they were to have a baby, a dog khinzir baby. Say that there was this. This is what he means in the first things. تَوَلَّدَ مِنْهُمَا أَوْ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا. Or from one of them. So say we have a dog that gets impregnated with a wolf. The wolf is, this is something that's not a dog. We would say he's kalb, he's dip. But if he impregnated a dog, then this dog that gave birth, then this baby here that is born from a dog, it's gonna, even if it was half wolf, it's still gonna be dog, and it would still be najis. It would take that ruling. And the same thing is like if khinzir somehow mated with something else, I don't know how that would happen, but if there was like a pig that somehow got mated with something else and crossbred, whatever came from that crossbreed would be najis as well. It would take the same ruling as that.
Mm-hmm. So what is the implication of like a skin from any of these animals being impure? That means we can't use it.
We can't pray in it.
So
we can't pray in it. So if so we can't use it to pray, and we also can't sell it if it's something that's impure. In general, like things that are impure, we can't sell them. But most of the time we'll be looking at purity so that we can pray in it. So if I were to wear an animal skin, say I have a leather coat here, I can pray in the leather coat because it's been tanned. But if I were to just put a skin around me that hasn't been tanned, like this, if it wasn't from an animal that was slaughtered Islamically, then this is something that's najis. Yeah, so I would have to make sure it went through the tanning process first, and then after that, if it gets the ruling of purity, that it's pure, and then I can pray with it, or I can pray on top of it, or something of the sort, and I can benefit from it in a normal fashion.
So typically for like clothes and garments.
Yeah,
Okay.
typically. And so he gives, and this is something you'll find with the fuqahas. A lot of times they will come up with scenarios that aren't realistic, and they will do this in anticipation that if this were to happen, this is what the ruling would be. And they are very far thinkers. Sometimes they will come up with things that we would never expect, and they have already talked about it before. And it's something that we only now, like we talk about it now. Like we would only have this scenario come up now, but they have already talked about it and maybe talked about that just because they would say, if this were to happen, this would be the answer. If this were to happen, this would be the answer. That's what he says here. وَمَا تُوَلِدَ مِنْهُمَا. So if we had if we had a pig mixed with a dog, like this would be the ruling for it. Of course, this is we know that genetically this would not happen, but if it were to happen, this is the ruling that would be there. And so they'll use this in this way. And also, say if you have like a coyote. A coyote is not a dog. Coyote is not a dog, even though it looks like a dog and whatnot. And like same thing with a wolf, it's not a dog. And if we were to say that the coyote was a woman and she gave birth, and we think that it was dogs, we would have to know for certain that what she gave birth to was from a dog, and we can't know that. But if it was from the other way, so if you have a dog that got pregnant from a coyote, or like if you have a woman dog that got pregnant from a coyote, in this case we know since it's coming out of the woman, we know for sure that this is najis. But on the other side, we're iffy about it, and when we're iffy about things, in this case, we don't know whether or not she was impregnated by that dog or she was impregnated by another coyote. So in this case, we would say, no, she's still on the asl, or like the foundation is that everything's pure until proven otherwise. And so she would be in that sense.
What does, I don't know if the Shafi'i madhab has talked about this, but some people say now that dogs are domesticated wolves or bred in generation to generation. Domesticated humans used them and they became dogs. Like, has they talked about this?
This is, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they were already domesticated. They were dogs. Even if they were in their roots back in the wolves and whatnot, but the dogs, in the way that dogs were mentioned in like dogs, they have a word in Arabic, and this word has a ruling that's connected with this specific subspecies of this family. So this specific subspecies in the family has this ruling connected with it. The other subspecies, or like the big families, I don't know exactly how they say it, but these other canines that are still there, that aren't like the canines that would be considered dogs. These have they're on the same ruling, like wolves and whatnot. If it's a wolf, it's a wolf. But if it was mixed with dogs and it came to us in a mixed form, we know that this is dog. And so it's a dog. And so we wouldn't say that this is in that way. But this is the only, of the scenario that he gives here, the only plausible scenario is the mixing of dogs and wolves and coyotes and whatnot. And so the second one, the last thing he says here, or I think going on to the next thing, he says, وَعَظْمُ الْمَيْتَةِ وَشَعْرُهَا نَجِسٌ إِلَّا الْأَدْمِيَ. And so here he says, in the azm, which is the bones of Mayta is najis, as well as the sha'ruha, which is the hairs of, or the fur of them, of anything that is Mayta, is najis. And what he means by this also is he means that this is najis and it doesn't get purified. It doesn't go through the tanning process. The tanning process is a rukhsa. Like this is something that is made easy. It's an exception from the rule that's made easy for us. So this only applies to what is narrated. And we don't say that if we were to do similar things with the hair of it, and we were to do similar things with the bones of it, that it would change. No, this is for the skin itself. And so like on the Shafi'i madhab, like the hair, like if you have some of the boots, like if someone was to have a boot that has fur lined, the fur itself, that would be a problem. Because if it died Mayta, it wasn't slaughtered Islamically, but it died Mayta, then it would be, the fur itself needs to be removed. Because this would be najis in the madhab of Shafi'i. And of course there's another view that hair is not najis, and this is the view of Ibn Taymiyyah. And he says that fur or like hair is something that is it's like a plant. So when it falls off and whatnot, this would not be something that is najis, but rather it's like a plant in that even after something dies, the hair still starts growing. Like if you see a person after they die, if they shaved like their mustache or whatever, after a few days it would come back. Like there'd be stuff that comes back. So the hair is like a plant-like material. So he says that this doesn't have the same properties of something that is living and then died. So then it became najis, but rather it'd be something that isn't najis in that. Of course, this is a strong view, and I personally hold this view, and it's easier for someone to work with. Of course, the Shafi'i madhab, if you use this, if you had any hair on your coat from whether it's a dog or a cat or any other animal for that sake, it's najis. Like the hair itself is najis because it fell off the animal while it was alive, so it's najis. Because it was a part of the animal and there was life in it and then it fell off, so now it's dead and now it's meita on you, and that's najis. But if you say that there's no life that runs inside of hair, but rather it's like a plant, then in that case it wouldn't have that death associated with it, so it wouldn't become najis. Of course, this is the easier view.
So is this the reason why boar bristles aren't? Is this from the ruling?
Boar bristles are the boar itself is khinzir. It's a type of khinzir. So whether it's a wild pig or a domesticated pig, a boar would be of the pig. So he would always be najis. And there are exceptions that the Shafi'i will talk about, like if someone's riding an animal, the animal's hair that fall on him, normally he's forgiven for that. Not that it's not najis, but rather he's forgiven for it because it's hard, Yeah.
But my thing is, when you say that the implication, like you can't wear it and stuff like that, but like a boar bristle, you just brush it. So is it that you can't touch it, you can't interact with it completely?
A boar bristle. If something is najis, there's a basic principle with najis is dry on dry, there's no problem. But dry on wet, it's going to transfer the najis to whatever it touches. Mm-hmm. So if I were to have, let's say I had a boar bristle, whatever, a brush or something, if I were to brush my beard that's wet with it, I would be making my whole beard najis. Because that water that hits the boar bristle would then become mutanajjis, and then it would be putting mutanajjis on the rest of it. Becomes something that's najis now. It takes the ruling of najis, and I'm putting more najis all of myself, and that's haram. Like to spread najis on yourself is haram. And so this is of the things. And also to sell something that's najis, it's impermissible. Like to sell najis, it's impermissible. It doesn't work. And this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab. I didn't think about the particular boar bristle thing before. That's a thing, right? People use this for hair?
Yeah, it's a big thing because it's very popular for beards. In America, especially in the States, stuff like that. But they have synthetic versions.
They have synthetic, there you go. Yeah. But if it's actual boar, which is from pigs, boars are pigs. They're wild pigs. Yeah. So if it's a pig, then it's something that's najis, and there's no going back from that. And it's also not permissible to buy or sell. It's not permissible to buy or sell najis in general. So this is and then he gives one exception here. He says illa al-adami. So after we talked about the bones, don't become they're najis, and also the hairs are najis. He gives an exception here. He's like, except for adami. Of course, he's not slaughtered Islamically, but he's not. We wouldn't consider him meita. But like something that is adami, which is like human. Then he is not going to be, he won't be najis in his death. Like his body's not najis, and he's not najis, and his hairs aren't najis and whatnot, because of Allah says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. And so like that takreem that Allah has done for the human race, this is something that it goes against saying that he's najis after he dies. It goes against that. And so even if he was like a mushrik or whatever, when he dies, this person wouldn't become najis because they died. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so this is that particular chapter here. And were there any questions regarding this chapter before we move on?
Yeah. Can you slaughter any animal in an Islamic manner?
There are certain animals that you can slaughter in an Islamic manner, and these are the animals that you're allowed to eat. So if you're allowed to eat the animal, you can slaughter it. And so when we talk about at the end of it, we'll talk about some of the animals that we're allowed to eat, which is quite a lot. And then there's animals that you aren't necessarily allowed to eat. And these animals that you're not allowed to eat, such as like a tiger or like a wolf or something of this sort, like that has fangs, or that is a predator, or like an owl, or something of this sort. This is like something that that kills with its claws and whatnot. We can't kill this and give it an actual Islamic slaughtering in this way. So we wouldn't say that it's dabah. We would say this is dabiha, but rather it'd be meita if it was killed. Something such as foxes. Foxes are one of the things that they say is allowed to, you're allowed to eat it. So in that case, they have a special way that they would cut it without, they would give it a slaughtering thing before that, so someone can appreciate its fur and whatnot. Something that they'll talk about. Yeah. Any other questions before we move on?
The title of the Fusul of my book, it says Al-A'yanu. What is the definition? Al-A'yanu mutanajjasu.
Al-A'yanu?
No.
Yeah, Al-A'yan are the things, or like the types or entities. A'yan. And these, if you put these titles in here, these titles, are they between brackets?
Yes.
Yeah, the brackets are the edition of the publication, or the person that did the tahqiq. This isn't from the actual author himself. So a lot of times you'll see this in books, they'll have chapter titles that are between brackets. If you look at the beginning of the book, you'll see that the tahqiq, he'll say, I added things between brackets to help make things more clear for people. I gave titles. He'll say, I gave titles. And this happens in so many books. But in the actual text of the Mutn, he doesn't have these. Yeah. So the next thing he says, we'll take one more, and I think we'll call it for that, is he says, فَصْلٌ ولا يجوز استعمال أواني الذهب والفضة ويجوز استعمال غيرهما من الأواني. So he says that it's not permissible, لا يجوز, as we talked about some of the ways of saying it's not permissible, haram, لا يجوز. He says here ولا يجوز استعمال, which is like using, أواني. أواني is the plural of ania, which is a vessel. So you say أواني الذهب, which is the vessels that are made from dhahab or fidda. And dhahab is gold and fidda is silver. So the vessels that are made of gold and silver, or that it's not permissible for us to use them. And he says use them. This is bigger than saying to make wudu from them. It's bigger than saying, as the hadith is narrated, don't eat or drink from them. Because these are for the mushrikeen in this life, and for you in the after, and for the akhirah. And so this is the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "La talbisul harir wala dibaj." And so he says, don't wear harir, which is silk, or dibaj, which is another type of silk. And dibaj is kind of a thicker type of silk. وَلَا تَشْرَبُوا فِي آنِيَةِ الذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ. And don't drink from the ania, which is like the vessel, dhahab wal-fidda, gold and silver vessels. He tells us not to drink from it. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا فِي سِحَافِهَا. And don't eat from the platters of it, of that. فَإِنَّهَا لَهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا. It's for them, meaning the mushrikeen, in this life. وَلَنَا فِي الْآخِرَةِ. And for us in the akhirah. And of course, the reasons the fuqaha, they look at this. One, they see that in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, don't drink and don't eat from it. But does this mean we can use it in general for whatever we want, or if we want to just hang it on the wall or something, like it looks cool, we can do that? And this eating or drink is something that we don't look at the eating or drinking as as something that it's only that nahi, or that prohibition, is pointing at the eating and drinking for it's like that's not the only thing it's limited to. We say this is an example of how we're not supposed to use it. What does this thing all have in common? The bigger meaning of it is isti'mal, which is like using these things. And of course, using in the way of like eating and drinking is like there's no purpose for it. Like you can use something other than that, and it's using money for like this is and of course the time that at that time it was money that's used. Like if you were to buy and sell and trade, you'd be using this. So it's like you're eating with money. It's kind of, and so of the things that the fuqaha they look at is one, the reasons that it's haram is because it's naqd, which is naqd is like currency. So you're eating with currency. And the other reason is that it also breaks the heart of the fuqaha, or the fuqara, which are the poor people. Their hearts are broken when they see somebody just eating with money. Like you could do something with that money, but instead you're just eating with it. When in and of itself it's currency. So these are the things that we look at when we see that.
But as far as decoration and stuff?
As far as decoration, like the madhab of Shafi is that this is not something that should be used as a decoration, using it. So like using it, so if I were to have a masjid and I put a bunch of dhahab around it and whatnot, this is not yajuz. Israf in that. This is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, that this is not a wise use of money, like to just put it up on the wall and whatnot. Of course, there's sometimes you have watches, and you have watches that have that gold. They have that gold plating, but that gold plating, there's a difference between, like, this would not be like if it's gold, we'd say like this is 21 karat gold, and if I were to put it up to fire, I could get gold from it. This la yajuz and isti'mal, like it's not permissible to wear this and to use it. But of course for men, like for women, they can wear their jewelry. But for men, this is not permissible for them. And but if it's a small amount, sometimes you'll have like a cup, and on the rim of it, you'll have a gold rim around it. You'll put just a little bit of gold. And this, if you put it up to fire and nothing would fall off of it, and you wouldn't get anything from it really. In this case, it's okay because it's so minor. You're only using it for like the look, and there's no problem with that. But if it's actually an amount that you could get and you can go sell it, then this is not la yajuz. And the same thing with silverware. Silverware in and of itself, it used to be like silver that people would go and sell, and they could get a lot of money from a silverware set. This is la yajuz.
But didn't they wear silver la? Was there such thing as silver rings?
Yeah, the silver ring, this is something that the Prophet ﷺ, he used the silver ring for a purpose. But this was actually for a purpose, and this is also a ring. As far as like for men and women to wear jewelry, the women are allowed to wear as much of dhahab as they want, as long as it's of course not in front of any ajanib. In front of it can be in front of her husband or her family, but not out and about where people can see it or hear it. But when it comes to men, they're not allowed to wear dhahab. Like when it comes to dhahab, they can't wear dhahab jewelry. They're not even a dhahab ring, but they're allowed to wear the silver as a silver ring. The Prophet ﷺ used to have a ring that said Muhammad Rasulullah, and so he would use this as a way to stamp official documents, because he heard that this is the culture of the people. When they send out official documents to the kings, they have a stamp that proves that this is the person who sent it. So he took a ring for this purpose, and so because he took it for this purpose, he had a reason for it. And of course we can see that this is permissible. We wouldn't necessarily say it's sunnah, but we'd say it's permissible.
So how about watches, like silver watches?
Silver watches it shouldn't be. I'd have to see. I'd have to look into that. No, silver watches. But if it was like solid silver, I think that's the issue. If it was like solid silver, but if it was just like silver plated, or like it's a small amount of silver that gives you that shine, that's something. But if it's like an actual solid silver that you're selling silver as well as the watch, like the watch's weight in silver is actually playing a role in the price of it, this is something else. I'd have to look into the silver watches thing. Yeah. Allahu a'lam. And so he says, وَيَجُوزُ اسْتِعْمَالُ غَيْرِهِمَا مِنَ الْأَوَانِ. And he says here that it's permissible to use other than that when it comes to like awani, like vessels. And so say some of the things that they'll mention is like if somebody had like an ivory, of course like ivory would be we wouldn't say, like the Shafi'i opinion is that ivory would be najis. So this would kind of break a point, because they say that because of the fangs of an elephant, that it's not permissible because it has fangs. They say that the tusks are fangs, and since it's a fanged animal, then it's not permissible to eat it. And this elephant, so you wouldn't have an actual elephant that would be permissible to use. So ivory is something that is najis. It's not permissible to buy or sell, trade, do anything with ivory in the Shafi'i madhab. But from another example, if I were to have something such as like a pearl, or I don't know, some type of johar, like some type of diamond basin where it's no gold, it's no silver, but it's like diamonds, and I got this diamond basin that I'm like making wudu from, they would say it's permissible, because it's not money, because that's the issue we talked about, that it needs to be naqd. And so like it has the And this is a illah, which is a reason for the reason that the tahrim follows it, is because it's currency, naqd, it's currency, and it breaks the hearts of the fuqara, the poor people. So when both of these things come together, then it's haram. But if one of these things fall apart, then it wouldn't quite be there. But if it was just the fact that it breaks their hearts, but it's not naqd, it's not currency in and of itself, then this is another thing. And so they say this is like permissible if it was some type of fancy thing, maybe made of like pearls and diamonds and whatnot, then it's permissible. Of course, then you shouldn't be wasting your money. And this is a general principle in Islam, that we shouldn't waste or throw away our money into the pointless things. But so anything else it's permissible to use. There's also small things that sometimes dhahab will be used for, such as like electronics and whatnot. And this, inshallah, there's no problem with the small use of it that's necessary for like electronic circuitry and whatnot. Inshallah, there's no problem with that. Wallahu ta'ala alam. So inshallah, we'll stop here for today. And we got through quite a few pages. We'll try to keep moving. And my goal in this class is to get us through this book in a short period of time, so that you guys, by this time, you've learned Arabic. At the end of this book, you should have already been, whether it be like 3, 6, 7 months, you should have already gone to a place where you can start learning in Arabic. And this is my goal, to get you guys on your feet running. So when you get into an Arabic class, you hear these terms, and you're not like, what's this? But you can actually understand. You can understand these terms. You had an exposure to the basis of this. And I don't recommend that people stick with English language for all of their learning. Like this is something this is out of necessity, and that we learn in English. And I also don't recommend that people spend all of their time learning Quran in Arabic, and then they forget about fiqh while they're here, and that they don't learn these other sciences, the basics of them, at least the basics. And when you learn these other basics, you'll be constantly using what you've learned in the Quran, as well as you'll be using what you've learned in Arabic, and we'll be putting it to use. And this is the best way to actually get strong in those things. And of course, the Arabic itself is a means to a goal. It's a means to a goal. So, but if you are learning Arabic, be patient at the beginning. Just a thing. Like a note is, be patient at the beginning, and there'll never be a wasted time learning Arabic. This is something that also, if you ever are learning Arabic, your time is never wasted. For the most part, especially at the beginning. Like this time is something that you'll even if you feel like you're pushing very hard in like some of the things, and like this time is not wasted, and you'll get the results of this, especially if you're pushing through sarf or nahu and even balagha and whatnot, and also some learning new words and just how many new words are there and whatnot. This is something that will benefit you in the long run. So keep pushing, and these classes, inshallah, will help bridge that gap until that time comes where you're running by yourself in Arabic, and learning in Arabic. And of course, once you're learning in Arabic, this is the strongest way that Arabic builds, and it compounds on top of itself. And may Allah make that easy for you and guide us all to what He is pleased with. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.